Welcome, everyone, to our fifth Data Sovereignty Show. We're very happy to be here with you and with other thought leaders, as well as innovators and legislators on the current data landscape and paradigm, where it's going, what's possible in this new world, and what are the outcomes that can best serve humanity as we sort of stand on the precipice of dramatic transformative change. Today, we're talking about smart tech and data sovereignty. Can they actually get along? My name is Robert Grant, and I'm from Crown Sterling. I'm the CEO and founder of Crown Sterling, a company that's made personal data sovereignty our mission. And today's guest is Alan Boyd. Alan is a very special guest with us today. He's the former head of acquisitions at Microsoft Corporation, and where he was in the late, I guess, early '80s, in fact, all the way up until the time the company went public. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that story and how he's kind of one of the earliest employees. And I kind of consider at that stage, when you join a company like that, you're kind of a co-founder. He's got 40 years experience in the field of tech. He's also created the whole smart city investment vehicles in Beijing, China. He's done so many acquisitions, developments. He was one of the lead developers on the original flight simulator, even on Microsoft, which is a really cool technology that Microsoft now no longer has, but it kind of became the precursor to what we're now considering somewhat of the metaverse, I guess. We're really pleased to have you here today with us, Alan. Thanks for joining our show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Good to have you. So first of all, I'd love to hear about your incredible career, all the things you've done. And I will say this, that Alan is most definitely a polymath. Alan Boyd, the polymath. So tell us about how you kind of made your journey along this, incredible, illustrious career you've had.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. After an introduction like that, I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say. Right?
I can't either.
Anyway, yeah, I just it's one of those things that I've always had in my life, of just happening to be in the right place at the right time, just slightly early. Sometimes, too early, but. Yeah, I ended up, cut a long story short, I ended up in 1980, joined Microsoft. There was only about 30 people in the company at the time. They hired, I already had a software company, and I had quite a background in software development, 3, 4, 5 years previous to that. So when Microsoft got the contract to develop the IBM PC, they couldn't tell anybody about it because it was top secret. But I knew about it because I had also been talking to IBM, and Paul Allen and I became quite close friends. Paul, we all miss him, right? But I just did a deal with them where I'd sell my software company, or the ownership of the company that I had in the East Coast, jump in my car, drive across country, and join Microsoft to lead their development of their product line for the IBM PC, which we couldn't talk about. So yeah, I had this amazing experience of 18 months before the IBM personal computer was launched and changed the world. There was only a very, very small group of people who knew what it was going to look like and how it would work and stuff like that. So we had quite a good head start, and I'd have to say that was the catapult that really got Microsoft, started and rolling, and still rolling. But we had that 18-month period where we could develop products for the IBM PC. But I had only been there for a couple of months when it was pointed out to us that there was a slight legal problem here because we had signed contracts with IBM PC, I think 14 contracts or something like that.
Really?
With IBM. And we'd also had to warrant that we would not develop any other products for the PC other than the ones that we had contracted with IBM, right? But what it didn't say is it didn't say we couldn't acquire products. So, I mean, maybe not the latter, but certainly in the spirit of the law. I gave up my head title there as head of product development and became head of acquisitions, which got me into investing software industry around about the same time when the earliest venture capital companies were setting up in Silicon Valley. I came at it from a different angle, of course, because any time I looked at investing on Microsoft's behalf into a company or acquiring their technology, if they already had any revenues, it was probably too late.
Mm-hmm.
So I've spent my entire life working on the very, very, very earliest stages of software development, and that's where the fun is, because that's where all the new stuff happens. Big companies don't make things in their labs. They maybe come up with some concepts, but then they go around the world and acquire the little guys who are doing all the good work. So
Yeah, no, it's true. It's very true. So, what was it like? Just curious, what was it like to work at Microsoft back in those days? And did you guys have any idea how big it was going to become?
nah, I can't remember. We were all too busy. I mean, literally, and people ask me. I just did an interview with the Microsoft Alumni Association on, 40-year anniversary of opening Microsoft Europe, which I did, and nobody has any photographs of it. Where everybody was, I mean, we were literally working 16, 18 hours a day, sleeping in the office, and getting. First time I met Bill Gates in the office, he was wearing pajamas.
Pajamas.
Pajamas. Yeah, I met him in the lift. He was going up in the
So
lift.
Elon Musk thought he was like one of the, few people that have done that, I guess, or maybe the first, but clearly it doesn't sound like that was the case.
No, we were all like that. I mean, the whole industry was like that. It was just exciting. It was fun. We were doing something nobody had done before. There were no rules. We're paying for some of that now, aren't we?
That's an interesting segue, I think, to where the next part of where I'd like to take the conversation is. But
Sure.
before I do that, I want to say, look, you've got a guitar in your background over your shoulder there, and there's a keyboard. Like in my office, at my home office, everyone always sees my keyboard right behind me. So tell us about your musical sort of background and what about that gets you excited?
Well, my musical background actually started from software. Although I played guitar when I was a student at university, and before that even. But while I was at university and I was studying mathematics, we started studying number systems and things like that, and very, very, very early computer technology, binary arithmetic, for example. And I just had a knack for it. I could just visualize, chains of data and chains of numbers in my head. So my mathematics professor, he called me in one day and said, "Look, he's got a friend, professor from the University of Toronto, who had come over to the UK to develop an interface for a PDP-8 mini computer to the world's largest music synthesizer.
Wow.
But they were having trouble writing device drivers. Would I like to go and have a crack?" And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, wow, and they pay money for this as well. So yeah, I was at the University of Bath, and I traveled down to London every weekend, sometimes during the week, and sat in this room with the world's largest synthesizer and two PDP-8 mini
Now,
computers.
I remember you ended up going to Bath University because there was a professor that you had met at, I guess, at Cambridge originally, right?
Cambridge, yeah, I wanted to go to Cambridge to study under this particular professor, John Acton. It was he was Mr. Laserbeam.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wanted to do that, but he left and went to a new university that's been set up in Bath, which is one of the most beautiful cities in England. Up there with Cambridge.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up going to Bath instead and had a wonderful time there. But yeah, studied optics and studied laser physics. So that's where we have some things in common there.
We do. We definitely do. I'm a student of optics and laser physics and engineering in that regard as well, and physics, and have been since my time at Coherent in particular. But so how has that sort of influenced, I guess, your thinking and how you look at the world, especially when you're looking at making things like simulations and such?
Well, I mean, what was interesting was I ended up working for this synthesizer company who I was writing software for. And then I got an offer to go and study in the USA. I got a scholarship. And uh, the company making the synthesizers had just signed a deal with an American company to do distribution of their synthesizers in the USA. It was a company called EMS, which anybody in the early music industry will remember their Synthy and, the big album that we worked on with that made it called Dark Side of the Moon. That was the last thing I did in England before I jumped on a plane and went to New York.
That was a favorite.
Yeah, so I went over there and I ended up, I was studying at university. It was the tail end of the Vietnam War, and I saw all that and was active in all of that. And it was a very nervous time for students in the USA. So I got somewhat distracted and started working with another company that was developing hardware for lighting systems and sound systems and, very, very large scale things like that. So they offered me a job. So I said, and it was one of those again. They said, this sounds great. And they pay money for it. It was just unbelievable that you could get to do your hobby and turn it into a living. So I ended up doing that for 5 or 6 years and building these basically microcomputers where I was writing all my own software. And it was on a tour when we were in Albuquerque, New Mexico, that I met Paul Allen. Right, by accident. He was looking at
so this was this in the early 80s or was it late 70s at that stage?
The 70s. This was the mid 70s. As a matter of fact, so they had just founded Microsoft and moved from Harvard down to Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I ran into them then, and we all sort of stayed in touch. 3-4 years later, I set up a software company in Baltimore with a couple of friends. And that's where, it was at a trade show in Philadelphia. Philadelphia used to be the computer capital of America before Silicon Valley. Yeah, just Malvern and that whole area of King of Prussia and everything. That's where all the silicon companies were based there. So that's where the trade shows were before Silicon Valley really kicked off. So I ran into Paul there, and that's where Paul said, invited me, come, please, we need help. I think they had signed more contracts than they had people. It literally was only about 30 people in the company at the time. So I agreed to go out there, and I started to look at this IBM personal computer that, I was supposed to develop a product line for. And, we started work with, we did Microsoft Word, was one of the first products we'd done with Charles Simone from Xerox and his team, which was amazing people to work with. And what later became Excel, we started working on things like that. And I got so snowed under by having so many projects to manage that I sat down and designed Microsoft Project. And went out, found a little local company in Seattle to write it for me. And it was, that's become a phenomenon, has a life of its own. But we were doing all this productivity software, and I thought, personal computer. If IBM are going to compete in the personal computer market, they'd have to develop ecosystems like the other personal computer companies, particularly Apple, Atari, Radio Shack, Commodore. They were all in the personal computer space. So they gave me the go-ahead to develop some games, right? And we didn't have much time to do it, so we sort of scratched around to find out what kind of games we could get in 3 to 6 months and put them out on, the most important technology announcement probably of the decade. So I did things like Microsoft Adventure and Olympic Decathlon and things like that. But Adventure was kind of interesting because I don't know if you watch Steven Spielberg's movie Ready Player One.
Love it. I keep waiting for you to walk out and say, "Thanks for playing my game," and hand me the keys.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, there was something there. It was kind of a steampunk version of what we're going to be, what the metaverse is going to be. But what great cinematics and vision, right? But the second project I started to work on was I wanted something to demonstrate how much better the IBM PC, which was the first 16-bit mass marketed computer, compared to Apple, were all 8 bits, and Radio Shack and everybody else was all 8-bit computing. So I wanted a product that would demonstrate the difference. So I did Flight Simulator, right, with Bruce Hartwig, right? And this was kind of prophetic because this was in 1981 we started this. And we all knew that the IBM PC couldn't really do graphics at the time. So we had to content ourselves with wireframe graphics. Well, then they moved out to the PC XT, I think it was called, something like that. The next version, which could do shading. So we moved the technology up. But what we had to do is develop a world model, a data schema back in 1981, 1982, that we knew we were going to fill up over years to come. We had no idea it would be this many years, but that schema has held solid for all those years, where as the technology grows, we could add new features, new quality, new quantity of everything. Don't forget, 1980, we had 64 kilobytes of memory to work with, right? Mm-hmm. Anyway, we got. I
remember my Commodore 64.
Yeah. Same thing, but it taught me very much that don't worry about the present. The hardware, we're software people, right? The hardware people will catch up eventually, right? So we just kept steaming ahead and building all these features and functions into products like Flight Simulator, which, I mean, if you look at its history, it's amazing, and God knows how many pilots it's actually trained. Microsoft did actually buy it back, I believe, and put it back
in. They did?
Yeah, something like that. But it was used for a while by Lockheed Martin to train pilots. Yeah. And it was actually one of the first pieces of software ever to be granted a patent, which is also very, I think it was the second. It was very early anyway. And that brought me into this whole field of intellectual properties, which is a whole different career again. But yeah, so this is when we started thinking about digital worlds. Adventure was a digital world without graphics. We had to create the map in two-dimensional space and lay it all out, and people would navigate, and that map would be translated into a mental image in their head. But it was world building. And in Microsoft Flight Simulator, if you look out the window of the latest Flight Simulator, it's realistic. It's photorealistic now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. It's great, and I hope Microsoft do something with all the effort that went into that work, and if they're going to be building, some metaverse project. But there's a lot of work over the years, and a lot of very dedicated people worked on that. So that from the world building and model building perspective, it all started, seat of the pants stuff. We had to get this done in 9 months, and we just made some good decisions, I guess. Right.
Well, good for you. Well, I have a question for you. So fast forward now to 2022.
Mm-hmm.
What has been good, I guess, with tech that you would have thought, yes, this is a great development? And then what are the things that you think might still need some more evolution and benefit towards humanity?
Well, I'll tell you what, this is. Here's a very strange observation I've made. Technology changes dramatically, like clockwork, every 14 years, right? Ever since we had consumer electronics, military spending on radio gave us AM and FM radio, 1939 war, right? 14 years after that, 1953, the coronation of Queen Elizabeth was the first big television event. And that gave Philo Farnham and Philco and all those companies a market for their television product. 14 years after that, we had television 2.0 with color television, uh, satellite broadcast, and transistors all came into a confluence. And that was when the Beatles sung All You Need Is Love live, right? That was the first global live broadcast, right? 14 years after that, we had the introduction of the IBM personal computer. Exactly 14 years, right? 14 years after that, we had a group of companies got together and decided to use a technology called TCP/IP, which gave us the word internet, right? And then 14 years after that, Steve Jobs stood up on the stage and held up iPhone, and mobile computing was started. And funny enough, here we are 14 years after that again. So we have to, what I've been doing is looking at what is the candidate this for this next cycle, this next 14-year phase of technology evolution, consumer technology evolution. And there's a lot of candidates out there. There's artificial intelligence. There's blockchain, distributed ledger technology, and cryptocurrency. And there's the metaverse, 3D, right? And all of these. But the interesting thing is all of them come together in what we now call Web3. They're all coming together. So I think the next 14 years is going to be the domain, the phase of Web3 and all, not one technology, but all of those technologies. And they should be taken as a whole because they work as a whole, and they do deliver some very, very exciting new opportunities.
So, you know, I love math, so I have to ask you the question. It's almost as if it's all a simulation if everything is working exactly on clockwork every 14 years. What's the magic of 14?
I don't know. Nobody knows that, and it's not getting faster, and it's not getting slower. Just like human beings, I think it's a generational thing. There's other things as well that could be business. You know, maybe 14 years is a product life cycle where you introduce a new technology, you build it up, everybody copies it, and then the prices come down as it goes into mass consumer markets, and the margins erode. So you got to do another new technology. And if you look at Apple, that's their story right now, isn't it? You know, the iPhone's 14 years old, and they have to. They know they have to innovate. They know they have to go to this next level. So the 14 years is interesting, but I think it's something to do with human life cycles.
I think you're right on that one. And maybe it has to do with music as well, because you could almost see it as octaves, and that there are actually 14 note positions in base 9 mathematics. And there are 2 note positions that, you know, I would call enharmonic notes. You know, they're kind of in between, but the note positions are still there. It's just the nature of the way the numbers tend to stack on themselves when you're just using doubling math. And it's fascinating because I think it could have something to do with that, but I don't know the answer to that question. It's something that I'll probably lay awake at night wondering, because there clearly must be.
It's funny because I had that conversation as a teenager talking to Karl-Heinz Stockhausen.
Yeah.
Right. First, you know, polytonic and microtonic and that types of music. You know, it wasn't very interesting. It wasn't. The interesting part is the mathematician. You'll know that what makes music interesting to people is harmony.
Yes.
But the interesting thing, you know, I've spent 20 years of my life in China, and Chinese music doesn't use harmony. This is very, very odd.
This is true.
Right? It does to an extent, but if you go back to
they play with the pentatonic.
Yes, it is, and you know, the original jazz was created by the Naxi people of southern China 3,000 years ago, and everything was unison. There was no harmonic. It was very, very interesting. They never got over that hump, whereas, you know, the Beatles certainly did, as did the Beach Boys.
Well, I mean, look, with the Overtone series, you can go with total unison and still hear all the other notes.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can imply them. Yes, whether they're actually there or not, the brain hears them, don't they?
That's right. The brain will actually make it. So you hear a note in unison of a choir singing perfectly in tune, and you'll hear all of the tones of the, the major third, the perfect fifths, all the way up, and it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. People don't think that way when they're playing a banjo, do they?
No, they don't. They don't. So what about what do you think are the big risks right now as we go into this world? Do you think the world is ready for something like simulations that in the not too distant future are likely to be as real and indistinguishable from reality as what we're experiencing in reality?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's. Well, I know that's going to happen because that's what I'm working on. Yeah, we're working on this concept of a virtual intelligent agent or assistant, whatever you want to call it. And we've been talking about this a long time. It's kind of interesting because the concept of the metaverse just sort of gelled. It's been around for decades, but it just sort of gelled, I guess, when Facebook, changed their name or whatever. But anyway, we've got a label we can put on it now. And the way I'm looking at the metaverse is sort of like a sandbox for artificial intelligence, where we can take artificial intelligence that we're not sure we want this in the real world.
Yeah.
But we can sandbox it in the metaverse. We can have entire communities out there and see how it works. And this is a great model because it does give us the ability to experiment before we bring it if we want to bring it into the real world.
That's very interesting. And I mean, a lot of people are, I would say, uneasy about the concept of metaverse, right? Because, I think a lot of people, there's a very large contingent of society that thinks, technology in general has not really been helpful for mankind. What are the things that we should be doing? Should we be seeking more empathy for society? Should we be seeking, more kindness? And has technology really done that? Is it helping us to learn more? And I could make arguments on both sides of the equation on this one. This one's not an easy one. So I'd love to hear your opinion and your wisdom on this.
Well, I mean, being personally involved, I'm quite disappointed in where technology has gone for a while now. I mean, when we were developing the original personal computers and the operating systems for them and things like that, we had no concept that it would be things like hackers or viruses. We just wanted to do good things, and we succeeded in many ways. But in the early days of computing, the only people who bought computers were smart people, right? But as it became a mass market, we introduced all humanity into computing, and all humanity is reflected in where we are now. Not just good, not just bad, but the whole spectrum of everything. But I think the move to the online system, particularly, we call it the metaverse now, it's fair enough, gives us a chance to hit the reset button on a number of these things. I mean, the metaverse is not a replacement for the internet. It's still the same internet, right? But the metaverse is actually a one-for-one replacement of the World Wide Web, if you like, right? And the internet. Okay, I've worked in post-internet technologies for networking and things like that, and there's some very exciting things happening there. But World Wide Web introduced, lack of security and protocols that just could not be sustained. We have a chance to remove some of them, like cookies, for example. Do we really want cookies? Is that something that really helps everybody? No, it isn't. It hinders everybody. And then there's the reason we're here now, which is the data sovereignty. I mean, in the early days of the World Wide Web, the services that companies like Google and Facebook and Twitter and all those provided, we're just, it didn't matter about your data sovereignty. It didn't matter about it because these were worth the price of it. But as you go on and on and on and on, and you're losing more and more of your privacy, and it's soul draining to many young people. But this gives us a chance to reset that button and actually use some of the advanced technologies we're working on to protect people, particularly young people and children, in this online world that we're about to develop.
So we met through a mutual friend who works in one of our companies here, Theon, and we ended up, not even knowing each other, but having such similar views on data sovereignty. You even made a recent video I saw on data sovereignty as well. Tell me, how you feel about data sovereignty and who should ultimately own data.
Well, whoever generates the data should own it. It's private, you know. If if and if everybody owns their own data, the demand for access to that data is not going to go away,
Mhm.
right? It's only the people who will profit from it that will change. Instead of it being the big tech companies who have, a monopoly on this, uh, individual ownership of data, and couple that with, micropayments and blockchain technology, cryptocurrency technologies, for example. There's ways we can do now that we didn't have 25 years ago, when the original Web 1, the Web 2 happened. Uh, we we have the tools at our disposal now to protect our own data. And if we want to sell it to the companies, marketing companies are going to need this data. There's nothing wrong with that. But it should be the owner of the data who sells it, not the collector of the data.
Yeah, and they shouldn't be compelled to sell it either. If they don't want to sell it, they shouldn't have to. It can be their choice.
Well, that's we have a solution for that. And if you look at what governments are doing, the United States and European Union and others all now have a right to be forgotten, right?
Hmm.
So with the intelligent assistants that we're building, which will, they have their own avatar just like people do. So they will be like your best friend on screen. And this is going back to, the writings, great writings of Douglas Adams, and a bit of a sense of humor in there. But you have this digital assistant who will be your companion in there. But while you're in there, it it will check all the things that human
It's
beings
like
don't
your
do.
R2D2 type thing, but speaks English, I guess.
Well, there's a code in there somewhere. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, now supposing you have an artificial intelligence assistant that whenever you go into a metaverse space rather than a internet or a World Wide Web site, uh, it checks the terms and conditions. And if it doesn't match your terms and conditions for you giving them their data, all you have to do is whenever you exit, your artificial intelligence agent sends it a please forget me message, and that's it. It could be something as simple as that. It won't be.
It's like a Men in Black thing, you know. I think Will Smith was looking for that Men in Black pen this morning, right
Yeah,
after last night.
yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I will. Right,
Yeah,
but
it was
yeah,
quite.
you get that. There's I mean, the good thing about a lot of the sort of science fiction that generates the ideas that we actually end up implementing is they inspire us, but their sense of humor gets to it sometimes as well.
True, true, true. Art imitates life, and maybe it's the other way around. I think that's exactly the
Well,
case.
that's where we're going. I mean, what we're doing with our virtual intelligent agents, by the way, we call them digital autonomous life forms, or dolls for short, which is, you can see where the sense of humor comes in here a little bit as well. Uh, and we they will have their own personalities. In the 1990s, I was chief technology officer of a small artificial life technology company in Cambridge, England, called CyberLife, where we created uh, it was a game product called Creatures, and they behaved like they were pets. And it led the Japanese copied it and called it Tamagotchi, which was wonderful, and it's actually coming back in Tokyo today. But we did that in the 1994 IBM personal computer again with floppy disks and things like that. And we started thinking, well, if we could get artificial life, convincing artificial life to be a pet in a tiny little personal 1994 computer, what can we do with the cloud, with unlimited computing power, with unlimited storage, with ultra high speed networking, with all of the above? And then you put the thing into a photorealistic avatar. So that's what we're working on. We're working on that. That will be your companion, your guardian, and you're to a little you're a Better Call Saul style lawyer, if you like, to deal with the big tech companies.
So it seems to me, though, that like with any type of new technology, people ask me this all the time. Um, some people will say, "Oh, this new technology is going to be all good, and it was built with the right intentions, et cetera." And then unintended consequences come out of that, right? And it happens all the time. And that's what that's the basic storyline of every sci-fi film that we watch almost. Somebody started with good intentions, and then all of a sudden they leave like a cyber arm somewhere, and it ends up going backwards in time, and then they build a whole, force of like drones that kill humanity. And so my answer to this always is that the answer is yes. It's going to be both sides. I think everything in this world that we experience will always have an equal opposite reaction for every action. And that there will always be an equal amount of good that will be perceived. And we don't even realize the power of our own conscious observation over what we experience. The conscious observation probably has a much bigger impact. I'd say greater than 90% of what we experience is how we perceived what happened to us, not exactly what happened to us necessarily, because we can perceive it many different ways. But I think that with each new technological advance, there will be an equal amount of good perception and an equal amount of bad perception related to that. And but it doesn't stop the pace of technology. Mankind has never gone backwards and stopped. And as soon as you put on a pair of Oculus Rift goggles and you experience where that technology is right now, oh my goodness. I put on a pair just last week, and I can tell you that I was in the middle of the Sahara Desert and it looked almost real. I was in a famous athlete's kitchen while he was talking with his wife, and she was cutting cucumbers. It was so amazingly real. I couldn't even believe it. And I think this technology is only going to advance further and further. And I think it's inevitable. What we need to do is figure out the perceptions and the means to be able to have the positive experiences from these, and also be able to use it for all the good aspects, because the bad aspects they're going to be there. But we have to be thoughtful about what those good aspects could be. For example, education. Mm-hmm. Education, like you said, the things that we want to test out, we can put into a holographic world and test it without it actually, damaging everybody.
Correct.
And will there be psychological effects? So that's a whole nother question, right? As we go into this, simulated reality worlds. But who knows? Maybe Elon Musk is right. Maybe we already live in a simulated reality. And I could probably give lots of arguments as to why that might actually be the case as well. And probabilistically, why mathematically it's probably the case. But I believe in optimism in general. And I'm always trying to find, even with our own cyber lens that I've developed with our team here, I can tell you I was not keen to ever bring it to the world, even though I had the patents on it and everything, until I knew that we could protect and safeguard information and data to individuals for individuals' sake, using uncrackable encryption like one-time pad. And I know that you know a lot about encryption and cryptographic protocols, et cetera. Can you tell us your experience and your thoughts on something like a one-time pad for quantum resistance?
Yeah, I actually had a company in just after the millennium in England again, that we're experimenting with one-time pads. The interesting thing is we actually rented an office in Bletchley Park where Alan Turing was experimenting with one-time pads as well. And we never really got it to work, largely because we couldn't actually generate truly random numbers back then. We could simulate noise and things like that, but we couldn't really get it to work. We just and then we found out that uh, the security community weren't really that interested in it. We actually did a G7 or G7, I think it was a G7 summit in Scotland in Glen Eagles, and they hired us to do we didn't have quantum encryption back then, but just an encrypted email service which nobody used. They were all running around on open channels talking, George Bush talking on mobile phone and in the clear. So they're really. I understand the problem with it, and that's how we met. I came knocking at your door and said, I want to know about your encryption and what can that do for us, because all of these issues of encryption, privacy, and identity are tied. They are the same issue. Some you need to be able to decide what you want to keep private and what you want to give away, and you obviously have to give something away. And I think where we can draw that line now, as we move to the next generation in the metaverse, where we draw that line is gives us an opportunity to solve a lot of the problems that we've had in prior generations of electronic communications. I can see that it's the same with blockchain as well. A blockchain is a great idea, but it's super inefficient after it builds a little bit. So, and the inefficiency means that you have to compromise somewhere, right? Now, where do you compromise and how do you compromise? And these are all the decisions that we're going to have to make over the next year or two. And it's great to see, your company Theon doing some amazing work in this area. That we are. I'm just happy I don't have to do it. But it was on my agenda. I knew that we would have to do this kind of work. We have to build that level of quality into the next generation of electronic communications. There's no doubt about it. And we have to give people the ability to decide for themselves how much they want to turn it up, how much they want to turn it down. That's going to be the hard part, right?
So as I think about Web 3.0, because I think you're right, I think that's probably the catch-all that probably picks up, the aspects of blockchain, decentralization, along with, a combination of metaverse and even potentially AI, and where those probably all merge together. I think we have an opportunity here to build a Web 3.0 that could be great, significantly more efficient, both from a, cost of society and energy perspective, through new forms of compression, like mathematical compressions, like we've achieved on our one-time pad as well. And also through new security protocols that, are dramatically more secure than say, prime factorization, which we know has been flawed. And I was interested to read last week, I gave a presentation at Black Hat a few years ago, where I got, some of the people from RSA like booed me off I was already done talking. They didn't ask any math questions, but they didn't dare. But they booed me out after. There were probably like 5 or 6 hecklers at the end of it. It was really interesting because I said that, RSA encryption can be cracked. And, that was sort of like anathema. It was like heretical. I'm Giordano Bruno, right? And they're going to burn me to the stake or something. And it's really interesting because exactly what I'd said just got published in Ars Technica about a week and a half ago, that, large RSA encryptions in the wild were cracked in constant time using the basics of a new way of looking at Fermat's factorization method, which is exactly what I've been saying. So, sometimes it just takes some time for it to come out that way. But I see it now as an opportunity, because I see it as, okay, the White House has already announced that everyone's got to move. The U.S. government has to completely shift over to quantum resistant encryption.
Yep.
And And one-time pad is already considered a quantum resistant encryption. It doesn't matter the computational model, but there are others that are believed to be quantum resistant as well. One of them is lattice based, although it was just cracked last week in a 53-hour test, which was quite fascinating to me. But if the White House is now mandating it be done within 6 months for the entire U.S. government, that says something to me. It says something that this is a real problem, because the government doesn't do anything that fast. And for them
what's interesting is just about 2 weeks ago, the Chinese government did exactly the same. They mandated that all government software must run on a blockchain, for example. So everybody's going that way. The funny thing is, it was governments who were against encryption and held it back for quite a long time, because for obvious policing reasons.
Right? Exactly. They want the keys to the back door. I mean, that's probably part of the reason why it's taken so long to get a quantum resistant encryption, because I think the government also at the same time doesn't want an uncrackable encryption. They want it for themselves, but they don't necessarily want it for everybody else.
Well, yeah, that's not going to happen, though, is it? Because there's always going to be people smarter than government. Did I say that?
Yeah, you did, and I'll definitely I'll second that motion. But no, seriously, I mean, I think that there seems to be an opportunity right now to set the stage for a much more conservation-oriented Web 3.0 that is more secure and benefits the average users, rather than the oligarch or the oligarchical users. Let's call those the states, nation states, governments, large corporations. And to me, that's what I'm excited about. This is part and parcel of the whole concept towards decentralization. And even though, central governments and central banks are now going to move towards a centralized digital currency, see, they think that the reason why people want and are switching over to digital currency is because they want to be able to use cashless society type benefits. And that's not really the reason. I mean, the real reason is about decentralization. And so you don't achieve decentralization by just going with the central bank currency. And
bank currency is just another credit card, isn't it? I mean, it's just a shorter method of transferring between two parties, but it really is just a credit card. But then again, there are digital currencies and there are digital currencies. I mean, my doll, my digital autonomous life form, is actually a form of digital currency, because it's based on what we call digital DNA, and every single one of them is different. So they're non-fungible, and we will be using the blockchain style non-fungible token systems as a means of control and distribution of those. So yeah, it all ties back, and the point of technology has always been decentralization, right? At least in my lifetime. The personal computer was taking it away from the big corporation. The mobile phone took computational power to everybody, So it's always been like that. And I don't think that's going to stop. I think, it's interesting. I've spent as much time in China as I have in the United States, and I've lived under these two forms of government, and they both have their benefits and they both have their disadvantages. It's neither of them is what is needed for the 21st century. Later in the 21st century, is people are becoming decentralized away from tribes and nations and governments. Technology is just enabling that trend. So we'll have to see where that goes. But yeah, I think it's technologies are empowering for the small guy.
I agree with that. So let me ask you one final question. So what do you see for the future? We see this trend in the 20th century. The value drivers in society were largely oriented around intermediaries, governments, large structures. That was a period of time that was unprecedented. Even countries like Germany and Japan were feudal states prior to the late 19th century. And
Hmm.
when you start looking at it in that context and you say, well, it's been more the norm for us to be decentralized than it has to be centralized. And I think we're all seeing, probably the end level of maybe even the point of diminishing returns for concepts that, and heaven forbid I would say it, even the forms of representative democracy that we have right now, maybe there's ways to reduce the redundancy that it seems we have. I'm paying 63% tax in the state of California. That just seems problematic to me on so many levels. And I don't think it serves society at all. In fact, I think it detriments society. So as we've made this transition away from societies oriented around valuing the intermediary and the oligopoly and the oligarchies, we're now transitioning towards a new paradigm, which is valuing more creativity, the thing that AI cannot do, the thing that machines cannot do, the human creativity. We're seeing value now being ascribed to artwork and music and in new ways through the form of NFTs, et cetera.
Hmm.
And I think this is a macro trend that's all part and parcel of this decentralization and a shift more and more towards maybe what would be considered a futuristic liquid barter exchange.
That's coming. I think that's coming. I mean, the concept of money is being diminished. Uh, it's interesting because one of the concepts we're looking at for autonomous assistance is the ability to take expert systems and build them into it so you can enhance your career by having this autonomous agent working for you. Now, where is that information going to come from? Where is that expertise to go into the expert systems going to come from? And it hit me. You can tokenize education now. You can tokenize experience and expertise and monetize it. And that's really going to a good cause. It's a way of sharing your experience and your expertise with maybe younger people, maybe, you know, uh, people in other countries or whatever. But all of these opportunities are opening up now. It's not just the money and the government that's been decentralized. It's society itself. And I think it's great because it's you know
I think you're right on that one. It's also why I think I showed you our BFN, our big effing number calculator, and and
yeah.
but I don't think I told you how we're going to bring that to market. And I'll go ahead and just say it's very exciting for me to kind of announce this here. The way that we're going to bring it to market is that we want everyone to have access to it. We want it to be like near to open source, right? And it has a lot of other features. It's the largest number calculator in the world that it can provide these highly precise number calculations in constant time. And so we spend a lot of time, and being a computer scientist, how difficult it is to work with very, very large number strings. And it's so non-trivial compared to what a layperson would look at and say, oh, it should be easy, right? I mean, we have reams and reams of data that comes in books and libraries and all this stuff. And why can't we deal with very, very large numbers? And there's lots of reasons for that I won't go into, but I'll just say it's very difficult. So, but one of the things that I really am thrilled about this is the education opportunities. Is that I believe that the next generation of technology that could benefit mankind, and of course, I caveat this with any new technology, I believe is going to have equal parts good and equal parts bad, right? There's always going to be unintended consequences. We can never say that something's going to be all good and something's going to be all bad. But I am excited about the future of where experience can go for humanity when we understand irrationality of numbers. And I think that's one of the things that we still have not fully grasped yet as a species, right? And you could say that mankind's level of intelligence or awareness could be measured by the degree to which it's able to perceive patterns versus chaos,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
So,
we talked about this, yeah.
even pi used to be chaotic to someone who didn't understand it. They didn't know that a diameter had an exact relationship to a circumference.
Hmm.
But as soon as mankind realized that, then sort of like the 100th monkey, all of a sudden everyone starts to understand it. And this has been true for all advancement of new technology and new understanding of mathematics and the language that is the universe. And so when you look at it from that perspective, what I'm very, very excited about is this notion that we have the ability to push the boundary on human awareness and human understanding farther than we've ever done before. So one way we can do that is through making it easier for people to visualize mathematics. And that's what we've done with our BFN. We have a visualization aspect. You can put it all into, triangles or polygons or polyhedra or three-dimensional shapes or four-dimensional, fifth-dimensional. You can toggle which type of way you'd like to see it.
Or hear it.
Say again?
Or hear it.
Or hear it. Exactly. Play it as music. And that's one of the most exciting things, too, is that all of it can be converted into music. And for those of you listening here, that'll all be able to be converted in 432 precise temperament tuning as well. So that's an important one. But I will say this, that if people use this in university settings, I believe the patterns we've been able to find to allow us to do things like one-time pat, make it practical, to allow us to compress data, make that more practical, and potentially many multiple times of compression as well. This all came because we were working with very, very large numbers that we'd not been able to look at and see before in the same way. So I want the world to be able to have access to this. And I want them to have an incentive to do it too. So they're going to earn to learn and learn to earn. And one of the things that means is that anyone who contributes the visualization to our overall growing consciousness, mathematical, geometric form or musical form into one collective, right, will be able to earn tokens as a result of that effort, right? So in a way, and all of it's utilizing our top compression stuff and everything as well. But what this then means is you'll be able to view a geometric structure that's growing and being added to from around the world that is completely tied probably to the notion of consciousness. You'll be able to view it and see it and watch it grow and listen to it and see it in colors. You'll be able to see it in different dimensional forms. You can toggle it to be able to see. If you want to see it as a shadow form in just 2 dimensions, you can. If you want to see it as a 6-dimensional object in motion, you can as well. This is going to be one of the cool things that we're excited about doing. I just kind of unveiled this to our team, and they were all super stoked about it, because I think it also allows us the ability, just like we track things like the random number generator at MIT. When 9/11 occurred, there was a massive change in human consciousness that then had an impact on the random number generator and how it was pumping out random numbers. This will be the exact same thing. We'll be able to see major events in human society and the impact that it has on the morphology of, the shape that is growing from this geometric structure that everyone's contributing to.
Yeah. Visualization is, we both studied mathematics quite extensively, but how do you explain to somebody who's not mathematically inclined the importance of a random number and how it is difficult to generate a random number? And if you could, what could you do with it? Totally. It's abstract. I remember when, we developed a personal computer, and people asked, why would you ever want a personal computer? No, most people have one in their pocket, right? And laser beam, the average person owns about 5 or 6 laser beams and doesn't even know it anymore. It's in your CD player and it's in your mouse, and it's, it's that visualization that help people get over. This isn't technology; it's useful. Technology is something that's in development, and we don't know why we're doing it, but some people do. And for us to get over that and allow people to visualize what it is we're doing with, these new number theories and with quantum computing and why do we need that stuff? It's not until you've had it in your pocket for 6 months that you go, oh, wait a minute, I've got one of those things that I used to think were funny. Why would I need one? And now I can't live without it. Right.
It's like a light bulb. If you think about it, it's like, imagine how hard it was to innovate at night when you had to use candlelight for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then the light bulb allowed us to be able to think and put those thoughts down after hours. Now, we could argue that also had a lot of negative consequences on family life and all kinds of other stuff that comes along with that, and probably sleep time. And now we're all sitting up late at night, with insomnia, looking at these stupid devices.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is just part of the consciousness and the evolutionary path of mankind. And this is the path that we're inevitably on. And I think, I'm a believer in destiny. I've always believed in the past that I could really impact my destiny. And now I've kind of come to the realization that, what, maybe it really is just predestined all along. But that's a whole nother conversation. But I want to thank you for taking the time with me today, Alan. It's lovely to spend time with you, to get to know you. I hope you're enjoying my book,
Yeah.
Philo,
Yeah.
and I look forward to seeing you in person very soon, and working on some projects together.
It's heading that way, isn't it?
It definitely is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert.
All right, all the best.
All right,
Bye bye.
bye-bye.